Paige LaNasa. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Paige is the head of marketing at Forager, and Forager was founded in 2018. It's about 75 people, and it's based out of Chicago, Illinois. On the funding side, they have raised Series A, so a total of $10 million. And to give a little bit of a blurb around what Forager does, it's a cross-border logistics technology company that makes shipping truckload freight between the US, Mexico, and Canada super simple and cost-effective. So essentially, a tech company that happens to be really good at moving freight. Is that a good sort of blurb around what Forager is?
Yeah, that is an excellent spiel. So if you ever want a job here, just given that spiel, that would be perfect.
Really makes it succinct, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so thank you for coming on here. I am really looking forward to dive in and understanding what you guys are up to. I actually recently spoke to George from ShipBob a few episodes ago. So and ShipBob also deals with logistics. It's a tech company. So this will be really interesting to kind of understand because they're a different size company to understand what you guys are working on versus what they've been working on. So happy to have you on here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Perfect. So why don't we start with I gave a quick spiel about Forager. Maybe if you want to fill in any gaps and talk about Forager, why do you exist? Who are you for? What problems do you solve? Kind of get into that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of the first big question is the why. And it's kind of a simple answer. It's logistics is the backbone of all global commerce. Like there are very few things in your life that you'll touch that haven't sort of been in turn touched by logistics. But despite that, like despite the billions of dollars of goods that move between the US, Mexico, and Canada, it's still this very complicated, very analog process. There are two countries involved, seven plus parties, different languages, different jurisdictions, different customs. So it's this incredibly complicated, incredibly snarly logistical nightmare. And as a result, a lot of the innovation, that we've seen in the domestic space with, your convoys and your, ship bobs hasn't really made the jump to cross border. So this really, really essential service is a nightmare. And that's kind of where Forager comes in. We use that technology, we use a digital marketplace model to just connect the dots between shippers, that's people who have freight they want to move, and carriers, that's people who can move that freight, and make that connection very seamless, very transparent, and kind of give them that domestic service on an international level.
Wow, that's a way better explanation of why you exist and also how you're different from others that are out there and how you're and the problem that you're solving. So sounds like a really meaty problem to tackle.
Yeah, it's
So
it's ambitious.
definitely. So you joined about a year and a half ago, and I'd love to understand, like when the company pretty much got started, right? So you were in the thick of it, and I'd love to hear, like, what were you working on in those early days as the sole marketing manager? What did you do early stage, given that you had limited resources? What did you do to stand out back then?
Yeah, so I was actually, now that I'm thinking about it, one of the earlier hires when I joined, we still called Forager Friday Mezcal Friday. So that's about where we were as a startup. And I was the first and for a while only marketing hire. So I was the marketing manager of myself. So a lot of the work that needed to get done, I had to do. So the early days were spent kind of ingloriously doing that nitty gritty foundational work. Like we didn't really have a social media like presence at all. We didn't really have a solid website. We didn't really have a solid system for inbound. Like there was basically nothing. So it was doing that nuts and bolts, get these processes in place, test, iterate, go, do it yourself. I learned like Photoshop and just generally like tried to fill in all the gaps myself. So to stand out, Luckily, I have always had a background in like small businesses. So I'm kind of used to having to do it all myself with like no money at all. So don't feel too bad for me. I knew what I was signing up for when I got hired. And I sort of approached it the same way that I'd approached it previously, which is, all right, what's the free stuff? What can I get that's like free? What can I get that's like an early win, a low hanging fruit? Like what are the basics that I can get out of the way? And then in terms of like standing out, really our focus was, executive positioning, which I think is most startups. You've got your charismatic founder, you get him a lot of interviews. We're very fortunate in that Matt Silver, our founder, has a lot of experience in logistics and, is kind of a figure unto himself. But beyond that, we did this philosophy of make good stuff. And I think kind of good and valuable are concepts that get conflated a lot. Like, I'm sure we've all read textbooks that are full of really valuable information, like critical data that is just awful to read. Like, it is not good to read content, it is just valuable content. So, we wanted to avoid producing stuff that's just, rote. Here is what logistics is. We wanted to make it good and compelling and interesting. And we did that by bringing a lot of humor and like doing freight memes in our newsletter and just generally like bringing some personality to elevate beyond that standard thought leadership and make it into something that's like fun and worth engaging with, beyond just I need to know what transloading is, because you can go to Wikipedia and do that.
Yeah, so you essentially brought that personality. You created the company sort of represented a person, and they were humorous, and you made logistics more fun. And that's really cool. I love to hear that when people shake things up in the industries that are they're a bit more nervous to go in an unfamiliar direction and bring like a little bit of edginess or a little bit of humor, but you weren't afraid of that. So that's really cool. And that resonated well with your target audience.
Yeah, like freight people, there's a lot of jokes about freight people and how once you're in logistics, you're in it for life because you just can't leave. They won't let you leave. And I found that to be true. Like it's a very diverse bunch of people who really love what they do and are really entrenched in the industry and bring kind of their whole selves to work. So I think a big reason we've seen, a lot more engagement online, we get a lot of nice compliments and comments about our blog, is because they're like, yeah, I'm just a person and I really like being able to interact with content on that human personal level. Like, I mean, who doesn't like a good meme? Really? Like, yeah, it was just connecting with them in that way.
Absolutely. Who doesn't love a good meme? I can't think of anybody that doesn't love a good meme. When you mentioned low hanging fruit, and you did talk about social, the website, starting some inbound traction. Can you talk more specifically about like what was one or a couple of the low hanging fruit where you had really good impact from what you were working on?
Yeah. I want to say probably email marketing. There's a lot of great tools out there. Like I think MailChimp at the time was free up to a certain number of contacts. Like that sort of thing. It's really easy to just create drag and drop templates and just send out some lists, like test the waters a little bit. Like we got some great responses and engagement very early on with just those super straightforward MailChimp standard templates. That was a big win, for us. And the other one was just starting a blog. We had a website already, so putting out content, like not even every week necessarily, but sometimes only 2 or 3 per month. That was a great way to just give people a reason to visit our website, even if they're maybe not ready to buy, or even if they don't have any need for our services just yet. So those were two great ways to drive both engagement and, traffic.
Awesome. So not only did you create that foundation, which the company definitely needed in those the early days, right? Created that personality. You also had some wins with email marketing, the blog, like the content engine started going. And it wasn't just about branding yourself. It was also about getting some engagement, people coming to visit, coming to read stuff that you're writing that's interesting, that's good and valuable, right? And then further down the line, if they're interested in working with you, then they actually, then they purchase. So awesome. Thank you for walking through that early stage stuff. I always like asking that if a person has been at a company for a while or from the early days. I love asking this question because I always hear things like, "Well, I was looking for the free stuff." Well, we didn't have a lot of money, but you don't need a lot of money. You honestly, I think that that's a reason why it's so intriguing at startups. They can get People can be so creative, they don't realize it with so little. You just have to put the barriers on there and then you realize, oh my gosh, I can actually get so much done without having to spend a lot of money. So
Yeah, definitely. I think people conflate that good marketing with expensive marketing, but really marketing is just, creating a story or telling a compelling story, making a narrative out of this kind of big nebulous brand. And you can do that with a free stock photo and a little bit of photo manipulation. Like it doesn't take a lot to say something worth saying, or we wouldn't see so many viral videos.
that's right. That's right. And consistency is key, I think, too, right? So that people really truly get it. You repeat stuff over and over, and that's also free. It's free to create the story that you want to tell, and it's also free to consistently repeat it over and over. And that I think is the essence of really good marketing. So let's talk about the marketing team. Who's on it? What does that look like right now? Early days, it was just you. It sounds like there was no designer. You were like dabbling in Photoshop and learning stuff yourself. But what does the team look like now?
Yeah, now fortunately, it is not just myself. I am no longer the manager of myself and myself alone. I am very fortunate to have a small but very mighty, very talented team. How it breaks down is obviously myself, and then we have a sort of content slash digital marketing manager who really owns our email marketing and the execution of our content calendar. And then we have a digital marketing specialist who really focuses on running those Google ads and managing all of our Spanish language content, since we also do some marketing specifically in Mexico. So that's really the core team. And then the kind of further system that has really worked well for us is this idea of floating resources. So we have a business analyst who primarily works with like the sales and operations team, but is also sort of earmarked for marketing. So we've got that floating business analyst, we have a floating admin, and we have a floating graphic designer. So we can flex and change our capacity without having those like required dedicated resources.
That is super interesting. The floating resources. So essentially, you've got these people, they're full time at the company, and depending on what other team is in need of that business analyst or the admin person or the designer, you kind of share. It's the shared resource, right?
Yeah, very much. Like it kind of goes beyond just, oh, well, this is the person who sometimes does marketing. Like the organization as a whole really understands the importance and like kind of gets what it is we're trying to do here. So there is like a lot of focus and emphasis on, hey, like marketing is not your primary job, but like you definitely need to pitch in. Like we see all those ridiculous logo edits are doing really well, so you got to help them out with that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm familiar with floating resources. We actually had something like that going on, in particular with the business analyst coming on to help out with certain things in marketing. And I think that I think it does make sense. I think it makes if and it seemed to work for us. It seems to be working for you guys. And I like the idea of like floating resources, kind of going team to team wherever they're needed. They come and help out. So thanks for sharing that. Let's get into marketing and what you're working on and what's been working really well for you. The most recently, we talked about early stage. We talked about, there was low hanging fruit there. What's happening right now? What are the channels that are working really well for you? And maybe you can dive deeper on one and talk about why you think that is.
Yeah, so we're unique in that we are a cross-border business, so we service a cross-border audience. And we are also a marketplace, which means that our audience is kind of segmented into supply, which is, your carriers, and demand, which is your shippers. And then within that, there are further segments between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And within those segments, there's enterprise versus mid-market. So really, it's this incredibly vast potential audience. So the things that sometimes work don't necessarily cross apply. So definitely, like, a lot of the successes we've seen have sometimes fallen flat in other markets. But if I want to get like more specific on kind of an unequivocal success, that would be mostly inbound, primarily for a Mexican audience. We've seen a lot of great successes with Google Ads, particularly. I don't know why we get a lot more traction in Mexico versus the United States. Like I could sit and speculate, but really we've seen just a lot more seeking out, a lot more willingness to give contact information, a lot more willingness to use personal emails even, and just a lot more engagement. So really we've gotten a lot of success from the Spanish language Google Ads,
Okay,
Mexico.
awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about like what do you share in those ads? Like what does the creative look like? What are you actually trying to get them to do? What's the experience like in when you get someone's attention with an ad?
Yeah. So I think, we're again, kind of unique because it's a very binary decision whether or not someone can use our services. Either they ship cross-border or they don't. And that's not really a criteria that you can, you know, include on LinkedIn. Like I can't specifically target people based on whether or not they ship cross-border. So outbound is kind of difficult. So your display ads, you don't really know. You're just sort of making an assumption about your audience. And that's kind of off-putting, especially for an email. It's like if I get an email about a dog grooming service, I don't have a dog despite the dog barking behind me. I don't have a dog. So it's just not as relevant to me. So with our inbound, we try to really speak to the need. Like if you're sitting down and you're Googling cross-border shipping, you have a clear and present need. So our creatives need to be as clear and present as possible because we know with outbound, who knows who we're talking to, but with inbound, we know exactly what they're here for, and we try to very succinctly explain what that is. So our keywords are very straightforward, self-explanatory. Our copy is not very flowery, like you've got stuff to ship, we can help you ship it in a way that is clear and easy and innovative. So yeah, there's not a lot of like art to it. It's really just being straightforward because they're already looking for that straightforward service.
Yeah, so essentially, you're really just trying to get them to come onto your website and contact you. Is that like the journey that you're trying to do to get them to? It sounds like you're not using the ads to share some kind of content. You're really just using those ads to get them onto your website and then maybe schedule a call with your sales team or fill out a form or something like that.
Yeah, very much. We're just trying to drive that kind of traffic and start that conversation. Because again, usually they know what they're looking for, and cross-border, is a very, very underserved niche. Like as a result of being so complicated, there are so few companies that focus on it exclusively or even at all. So the fact that there is any option for them, and then we are speaking their language, we are saying, yes, here are the services we offer. They're what you're looking for, because you are doing the shipping every day of your life. Like we just kind of are able to connect with them on that. Like, yep, we got what you need. Here's the phone number. Give us a call. We'll make it happen for you.
So are these people experiencing problem like that this is just across your target audience? They find that the shipping across borders is really difficult and they are trying to figure out ways to solve the problem and you're fine. This is kind of new to me, so I'd love to hear from you. Like what is it that's happening today with folks that are trying to ship cross border? Are they're just coming to roadblocks where they can't figure out how to make it more simple and cost effective?
Yeah. So, first of all, I can't believe that you don't have a deep well of knowledge about truckload North American freight. No, it's I'll give a really good example. So, if you want to ship a truckload from here to say El Marquez, and you want to get just a quote. You want to know how much it's going to cost you. You'll have to pick up your phone and you will need to call individual carriers, or you'll have to call your broker and say, hey, I really want to move this. How much will this cost me? And they go, okay, well, give me a sec. And then they'll have to go and call their carriers. And you'll have to repeat this over and over and over. And everyone is calling everyone else, trying to gauge. There is no standard sort of market cost. It's not as, transparent as domestic. So sometimes getting a quote can take you from 30 minutes to like 6 hours. Like it can take a serious amount of time. So for your average cross-border shipper, they're really just like, man, I just want this to be easy. I just want to be able to get a quote. You can open Amazon's website and get a quote on a lane right now. But the second it crosses a border, you just can't. So usually they're coming to us expecting this difficult system, or if they're at the point where they're Googling it, they're kind of fed up. They're like, man, I just really need a solution right now. So yeah, we're sort of solving that problem, and we just provide quotes automatically. Like you can go on our website right now and get a quote, or you can, join our network and automatically know exactly how much you'd be making on each lane. So yeah, it's just providing that level of like automation and transparency for them where they never had it.
That's fairly self-explanatory. I'm glad that you explained that to me, and it makes sense why those ads would be working. They just wanted to simply explain, like, talk about the need, that the problem that they're having, and get them over to your website, get that quote. That's all they're looking for. So pretty self-explanatory. Love it. What about challenges? What's keeping you up at night? What are you trying to figure out? Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So, as I kind of mentioned, it's this highly specific market within this absolute sea of people, across countries and even languages. So for us, the challenge is always, how do we find the needle in this haystack? Like, how do we find the person who we ask, do you ship cross border? And they will say yes. And there isn't really an easy answer for it. It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of testing. It's a lot of watching some Google ads succeed while others fail. It's, being really surprised when traditional media works for one market and then absolutely bombs in another. So yeah, that challenge of finding those people that exist. You have the trade numbers to know that they exist, but finding them is the thing that keeps me up at night. It's am I talking to them? Am I where they are? I don't know.
So why do you think it's difficult? Because the way that I would approach that challenge is, you go out there and you talk to like 10 or 15 of these people and you ask them, where do you hang out? What things are you reading online? What virtual events are you attending? Or what do they like? What do they like to do? Where do they get their information? What are they spending their time doing? And just find out more about them. Have you done that before? Have you found anything interesting that could help you try to solve this sort of challenge?
Yeah. So, obviously we've done a lot of persona work. I think that's pretty foundational to most marketing departments. And for us, specifically, we've talked to these people, and a lot of the times these logistics professionals are very entrenched in the industry. Like they read industry publications, and we're like, okay, that's great, but so does every other logistics person. There isn't really dedicated, we are cross border and we only cover cross border media. Like really, the only that I can think of dedicated, we're talking about specifically cross-border logistics media outlet is FreightWaves. They do a column series called Borderlands where they cover those issues. But other than that, it's just sort of a small category within this big sea. And because this big sea has such a large audience, advertising within it is really expensive, sometimes prohibitively so. So it feels a little bit strange to take out, big display ads, knowing the majority of people who see them, even though they're within your industry, are going to go, oh, well, this isn't me. This doesn't apply. So yeah, so there is like some targeting that we can do, but yeah, it's difficult for sure.
almost like you need to start something for these people to bring them to you, like some sort of an ongoing virtual event or podcast or like something where you could get a whole lot of them that haven't necessarily started working with you yet. But I don't know if that doesn't exist yet, then that could be an interesting way to create a group of them that are interested in
Yeah.
and with your content. I think that you're probably starting to get that right, people that are interested in specific content that talks about the specific issues, logistics people that are doing cross-border stuff. You're going to get those people's eyeballs anyway, and you're sort of starting to create that group. So I could see that working for you too, where you just want them, like a mass of them, and then to tell them what you do and what you can help them with.
Yeah, very much. And we've sort of seen that effect more and more. Matt Silver, our CEO, has become more and more associated with this. Like he gets asked to write more and be involved more in the industry. And we have more people, returning to our website, which is always exciting. We have a newsletter that's continued to grow. So yeah, we've sort of had to, by necessity, foster a space for this audience. And so far, it's been going pretty well. And I think a big driver of that kind of comes back to making good stuff that's valuable and interesting. And if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that's right. So are you still able to hold on to that personality of, like, humor and just standing out in the marketplace in that way over time since the early days where you started this sort of personality, or how has that shifted?
Yeah. So obviously, pre-Series A, when we were still, a very small seed stage, uh, you have more kind of freedom to play in that way. It was just me. So basically, the Forager brand voice was just my voice and what I thought was cool and what I liked. And that is necessarily sort of evolved because other people now are contributing to the look and feel of this brand. But even as we raise the A and as we approach our next funding rounds, we have that same commitment to, well, even as we get bigger and even as we institute a lot more of like those big corporate processes, we still want to make good stuff. We still want to maintain the humor. Maybe we tell less jokes about tequila, RIP the tequila jokes. But we still want to approach everything like, well, do I like it? Would I want to read this? Is this something that when I have my 15-minute coffee break, I would scroll through? And I think you can do that no matter what size your company is. You just need to maybe be a little more careful when it's a bigger audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about 2020 and the impacts of COVID on logistics companies. Good talking to George from ShipBob. We talked a few episodes ago. We had talked about how COVID affected them, and clearly logistics has been impacted. There's I think stuff is just getting to places later, much later. So tell me, how has COVID affected your marketing strategy, if at all, and what do you plan to do differently this year?
Yeah, so man, it feels like I've probably talked about COVID hundreds of times at this point because it's all anyone can think about. But fortunately, logistics is one of, if not the most like necessary service for commerce. As I kind of mentioned earlier, it's so essential to literally everything we do that we've seen some of the volume decrease, but mostly just shift through other industries. So we've been pretty insulated in a lot of ways. Like almost everyone we work with is still working away, um, doing kind of that essential services. In terms of marketing, I think a lot of B2B industries are very reliant on, events. Like events are very core. They're very core to logistics. They're very core to a lot of the other industries we work with, like, produce and manufacturing and automotive. Events are so central that suddenly just not having any of them was pretty jarring. That did impact our strategy. Event marketing is not cheap. So we at once we're like, yay, look at all this money we have now, but also like, oh no, these were really big, important moments for us. But we weren't the only ones who were reckoning with it. And now going into 2021, a lot of these events have been replaced with virtual events that continue to get better and better and better. Like 2020 was a little bit of a trial run, but going into 2021, I think we're going to see like even more like elaborate, more engaging, more interesting virtual events that'll sort of, if not completely replace, at the very least sort of supplement the holes that those events have left.
So do you plan to have virtual events as part of your marketing strategy for 2021?
Yeah, we're thinking mostly about, sponsoring and kind of like glomming on to these other big virtual events. I think a lot of times, anyone who's run a webinar will know you go into it thinking, well, it's just a virtual thing. Like it shouldn't be that complicated. And then it's this logistical, ironically, nightmare. So yeah, we're probably going to hold off a little bit on the virtual events and kind of leave it to the experts who've had now a year to sort of readjust to the new normal.
Yeah, I was talking to someone else on the podcast about like let's just wait it out a little bit. We're not going to slap together virtual events if we haven't really done that before. And when the time is right and we know what we're doing, we want to make sure that we have a professional grasp on this. So let's just not rush into it. And so you're kind of in the same boat, talking about it in that way, and more of a let's just sponsor other virtual events that are happening, and leave it to folks that have already learned a thing or two this past year. So that makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely. And I have a healthy dose of fear and respect for like event marketers. Virtual events are not easy to put on. I'm like, nope, I know my limits. I know that I'm not going to be able to compete with those guys. They really know what they're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk a bit about you. You were always in marketing, and you did run events, right? If I'm not mistaken, in your past, you were in charge of running events. Maybe you've been scarred by that experience. I don't know. So from running events to using HubSpot for email marketing, you got a great experience there. Webinars, sounds like you've got experience there too. How would you say your background has prepared you for your role now, heading up marketing at Forager? Like, what is it from your past experiences that you're bringing in, that you're making use here now, and makes you the perfect fit for heading up marketing at Forager?
Yeah, marketing is sort of all I've ever done professionally, and it's kind of all I've ever wanted to do, which probably explains why it's all I've ever done. And I've been in it now for about like 8 years, doing a lot of work on the individual contributor level. So, doing some of that event marketing, doing like the design work, doing copywriting and editing, just sort of doing all of those little building blocks of marketing. So when you go into, a small business or a startup environment, having that experience, sort of understanding the full breadth of marketing and what can be done with marketing, and being able to, in some cases, do it yourself, is kind of invaluable. Even as I've grown the department at Forager specifically, being able to go into interviews and kind of have a conversation from a point of even just mild understanding has resulted in a lot better like outcome, and like being able to really articulate what I'm looking for and have these really good relationships and back and forth and understanding has really helped me kind of grow and build and shape the marketing department. Because I feel like now I can ask my designer for something and like be able to say, oh, I'm talking about, a drop shadow, or I know how to like move a layer in Photoshop. Just having that very foundational knowledge has been great for me. And kind of in that same vein, I would say for startups and small businesses, your first marketing hire probably shouldn't be like, your CMOs or your big executives, because, if you haven't opened Google Ads in 10 years, it's hard to do it yourself. So the DIY mentality really, really helped, because I think there's, people who are good at building and people who are good at steering these big ships. And I'm definitely more of a builder.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I talk to startups quite a bit about who do we hire, who do we bring on as our first marketing hire, and and on the one hand, they want to bring on someone that like knows what they're doing, but on the other hand, you want to bring on someone that is learning the ropes or is fine getting into the nitty gritty details and has been doing that recently. You're not going to get that with someone that's in a higher level position. So it's probably like the type of person to bring in as your first marketing hire, I think, should be around like marketing manager level. I don't think that like a marketing associate might not be someone with enough experience to hit the ground running, and you just have to figure everything out yourself for a little while. So it's tough, right? You don't want to hire someone that's like too experienced and was like leading another team. You really do want somebody that's an individual contributor, but it can jump right into figuring it all out and owning stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I was fortunate in that, I'd built a department before. So, I kind of understood that the first few months are going to be absolute chaos. And yeah, I think being able to roll up your sleeves and kind of do some of the work yourself just makes for a better marketing department. And that first hire, if it's me, you get to decide the brand voice and the style and the jokes. So like that is a hire that is very, very difficult to make. And I hope Forager thinks that I was a good one.
Well, probably since you've been there for a while. So,
I did survive the raise.
that's right. That's right. So, and I think that's also like, it's fun. It's fun to be the one that's making the decisions, and it's fun to get in there early stage and be the one that decides, on personality and some of the branding and what do you want this to look and feel like. I think it's fun. I think you also probably thought it was fun too. It's just a cool experience that if you're at a larger company, you don't necessarily get that blank slate, blank canvas that you can kind of morph it into what you want it to be. So awesome. Great. So let's talk about sharing something. I always like to ask folks to share something more personal. It shouldn't just be all business on this podcast. I would love to like understand you more as a person, maybe something about how you've been handling 2020, something about your career, something that few people know about you. So please share whatever you would like that's more personal to you.
Yeah, so something that is not readily available on my LinkedIn. Got it. I usually answer like those two truths and a lie or fun facts. I usually just say, "Oh, well, I collect books. That's my big hobby. I have over 400 books in my collection," and then I just leave it there because that makes me sound very studied and interesting. But in the
Oh, do
interest
you
of being
have
more,
400? You have
yeah,
400 books?
I have
Awesome.
over 400 books.
What are they? And I know this isn't like what you wanted to talk about, but what are they? What are mostly the books like about? What do you like to read?
Actually, you have fallen right into my trap because that's
Oh,
exactly what I was going to reveal. Is like on face, it's like, wow, that's a lot of books. You must read a lot and you must be very smart. But really, I like to collect specifically like old, obscure, very, very strange, and at this point, entirely useless books. So, like, I have a book about how to use typewriters. It's from like the 1920s and it's just typewriter lessons. And I have another book that's like this encyclopedia of all the great revelations in the last 10 years. And it was published in 1910. So, it's about like locomotion engines, and it's completely worthless in the modern era, but I am just totally delighted by these strange ephemera. I just love it.
that's so funny. So have you read anything that's kind of like mind-blowing or mind-boggling? These predictions that they make, there are some folks that read about the predictions that were made a long time ago, and then some of them actually came true. So I don't know if you've gotten a hold of any books that are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, or just something that made you really like learn in a new way to think about a topic.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I recently got my hands on a book of predictions for the years of 1995 to 2010. It's like an interpretation of Nostradamus's predictions. And like one of the predictions was children will get the vote, and another one was we will colonize Venus. And it is a total riot, especially because it was published in like 1994. So this isn't that far off. And yeah, I love that, exactly that. It's very wrong, but it did kind of fill me with like a little bit of, I don't know, like nostalgia. Like I feel like a lot of the predictions surrounding technology in like the 90s, or even like the as far back as the early 20th century, are so optimistic and like hopeful and like, yeah, we're gonna have this technology, no one will ever go hungry again. And it's kind of nice. It's kind of lovely that humans are so optimistic about, where we're going and where we'll be.
Yeah, and I also think like this past year, 2020 has, I'm sure you've talked to folks about this too. It has really accelerated how quickly we have to figure out how to deal with certain challenges. It's really accelerated a lot that that without COVID, maybe we would have taken a longer time to get there. So in a way, this could mean that we are kind of moving faster along towards progress than we would have been. So that's pretty intriguing. I don't know if you read about that in any of your books, but I do think about that every once in a while. Like, where are we going to be after the COVID years? What does that mean for humankind? Where are we going to be in terms of tech and work, and like what is going to be now more okay than it was in the past. Some things are going to change pretty dramatically, I think, because of what just happened. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we published actually a blog kind of talking about technology and more specifically like nearshoring. So in supply chain, China is very, very central to so much manufacturing. And this COVID situation, especially, in the earlier days when, a lot of the manufacturing outfits were just not operating at full capacity, like that caused a domino effect across every manufacturing sector, like basically in the world. And I think a lot of manufacturers and a lot of people in logistics sort of looked around and got a little scared because once the initial slowdown stopped and they started ramping back up, it took a long time for all those goods to come back across the ocean. It wasn't just a switch getting flipped. I mean, to this day, we're still experiencing some shortages here and there. And I think, not only is there this technology push to adopt and adapt and really innovate, there's also a reassessment of how we source our goods and where we source our goods. And we're already seeing a lot of companies sort of move into Mexico and try to bring it a little bit closer to home. And topics like environmentalism also move the needle. Like those huge barges burn a lot of fuel and are way less fuel efficient. It's gonna be wild and crazy. Probably not as wild and crazy as my Nostradamus book thought, but it will be pretty interesting to see where the world winds up.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for all of your insights and all of your expertise and experiences that you shared. Even something quirky about you. I love hearing about the more personal side of the guests that I bring on. So thank you so much, Paige. If anybody wants to reach Paige, you can find her on LinkedIn, Paige LaNasa, and find out more about Forager by going to foragerscs.com. And just curious, what does the SCS stand for?
It stands for Supply Chain Solutions.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for that too. Well, thanks
Absolutely.
for coming on here, Paige.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.